The Pastor's Heart, and Dominic Steele here, and thanks for joining us. And today we're talking university campus ministry and a significant study that's just been released about the positive impact that it's having. Our guests are Rowan Kemp and Geoff Folland, who work in Christian ministry at Sydney Uni. But first, it takes a lot to develop the Pastor's Heart each week. There are production costs, video, audio editing and mixing, social media, website coordination, and we're working hard to support and encourage more Christian leaders, but we need your help to take this ministry to the next level. If we can reach more people, we can encourage ministers as together we proclaim Christ in our different contexts. And so if the Pastor's Heart has encouraged your faith, encouraged you, challenged you in any way, can I ask you to head on over to bit.ly/thepastorspatreon and sign up as a supporter. For just $5 a month, you can help us fund our production costs and help the Pastor's Heart become a sustainable ministry going forward. Now, to Rowan Kemp and Geoff Folland. Rowan, Anglican chaplain at Sydney University and pastoral worker with the Sydney University Evangelical Union. And Geoff Folland, 20 years ago at Macquarie Uni, we used to know each other.
That's right.
You were doing Campus Crusade for Christ. That's evolved into Power to Change. Correct. And now at Sydney Uni.
That's right.
And you've both been involved in the different evangelical ministries that you lead with other faith groups on a study on the impact of faith groups on university life. Well, who's been involved and how did it come about, Rowan?
So, evolved in two different streams that came together under God's hand, which was lovely. One was Geoff's experience in being involved at Macquarie University and coordinating the chaplains there, and I'll let him talk about that in a moment.
Yeah.
From my point, I'm currently coordinating the chaplains from many different faiths at Sydney University, and I was aware that Sydney University had been unfortunately struggling in a particular area of its life to do with what they call student experience. The university obviously wants to do well in all sorts of different rankings.
They want to do research well and all those kind of things, but student experience seems to me to be a pretty core one.
Yes, and unfortunately Sydney University had really been struggling. So that was a big problem for them. They want to do well in this area. So they commissioned a high-level report to come up with a strategy to develop their student experience. They created a new position, a Pro-Vice-Chancellor. They did a headhunt to find someone to drive that strategy forward. And we knew that that person was about to start in October this year. We also knew that the university was in the process of developing a new 5-year plan. So we knew lots of things were up in the air, and one of the opportunities for us was to think, how can we convince the university that faith groups on campus, Christian groups included, really make a difference to the university community? That was the opportunity. And Geoff had some thoughts from his experience up at Macquarie.
Well, I'll come to that in a moment, but did that anecdotally feel true for you, that research that that Sydney Uni students were having a worse time on campus compared to other uni students from your discussions around the place?
It's hard for me to judge what other university experiences are like, but Sydney University is big. It's got a lot of students. There's a lot of administration and bureaucracy you have to navigate. It's an expensive place to live. It's hard to live close to campus, unlike some other more regional universities. So it makes sense that there's difficulties associated with being a student at a big city uni.
I remember coming from the Hills District, having a miserable time at Sydney University. I wasn't a Christian then, but yeah. Geoff, what were your thoughts about how it came about, the research?
Well, I think, as Rowan said, we were talking about this strategic opportunity. There was a moment in time where we thought, how do we speak into this situation? And my experience at Macquarie University was that the university doesn't really understand the work that chaplains do and how they interact with faith groups. And so if we could describe for them and demonstrate for them what that interaction was like and how chaplains contribute positively, then that would set us up well for an ongoing relationship with the university where they would perhaps understand what we do and therefore be able to resource what we're trying to do more helpfully.
I take it you drew in some of the other faith groups?
Yes, well actually Rowan did the hard work with interacting with them. So I came up with the idea. We worked with McCrindle Research to produce the report, but Rowan did as coordinating chaplain, it was his responsibility, and he worked hard at bringing in the other groups as well.
And just looking here, you've got Buddhist, Catholic, Christian community churches, Jewish, uniting church chaplaincies involved. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, we received some advice that if you really want to show that the research that you've done is significant, then you obviously need to do more than just Christian chaplaincies and more than evangelical chaplaincies in particular. And so I reached out to some of the other chaplains. We have a very good working relationship with the other Christian chaplains, all the other chaplains. Reached out to them, encouraged them to contribute financially to the cost of the report and get their students involved. And they certainly came on.
What did you find out?
Many things, many interesting things. A lot of it might be confirming things that anecdotally we were pretty convinced were true, and also some things that we didn't expect.
Right.
So that was interesting.
Well, let's do the things that confirm what you expected first, or some of those things. Yeah.
Faith groups make a massive difference to students' experience of life on campus. Faith groups really help students grow in their faith. Faith groups really help students navigate a complex environment to stand, particularly as a Christian, and faith groups are a key support structure that they reach out to in times of stress. All things that make sense if you understand Christian community. But now we actually have hard data to say to the university, this is actually the case.
That's right. And when you think about it, the university, what are they concerned about? They don't just want to improve in their rankings, but they want to make sure that students aren't dropping out of university because they're having a hard time. And so and we know that there's this tidal wave of mental health issues coming onto campus with this generation. And so what we demonstrated is that the faith groups provide that kind of peer-to-peer support so that students who are experiencing stress don't end up in crisis, because the university doesn't have the resources to support every student in crisis.
So what are the sizes of the faith groups? Are we speaking... I'm imagining the Buddhist one is smaller than the Evangelical Union. Do you want to just kind of unpack a little of that for us? Yeah,
there's a massive difference in size between the different groups. There's the number of evangelical students involved in both, say, Power to Change and the Evangelical Union. You've probably got in excess of just over 1,000 students involved. There's quite a...
Which is a significant proportion of the campus.
Yeah, it's sizable. That's right, absolutely. The Catholics are reasonably strong. There's quite a number of Catholics. A lot of the other groups would be smaller. Uniting Church is a smaller group. The Buddhists is a smaller group. There's quite a number of Islamic students on campus. The prayer rooms are very active.
Yep, and I think that breadth is really important to demonstrate to the university. But also to say there's lots of students who have a faith or have faith as part of their core identity who aren't actively involved in a faith group on campus. Some of the students who go to the prayer room, for example, aren't involved in the Muslim student group, but they're part of the community. And so I was really appreciating when I had the idea. I knew it wouldn't work unless Rowan was on board, and bringing the EU in to respond to the survey gave us a critical mass of respondents. So that was really important.
Well, I think we had more than 530 people respond to the survey. Out of a total, we think, of currently about 2,000 students who might be involved in some sort of faith community on campus. So that's a really high percentage. It gives us a good indication of what's going on. But if you look at other wider demographic data, it's a bit hard to work out how many university-age people in Australia have an active faith. That's hard to actually get that data from the census or other things. But the two surveys that have been done in the last couple of years would estimate that in that university age range, 18 to 25, somewhere between a quarter to a third of people in that age group say that faith is very important to them. What that means for the university is, out of their local undergraduate population of about 40,000, there's 10 to 12,000 students on that campus who say faith is very important to them, but only about 2,000 involved in faith groups. From a university point of view, they're going, well, that's a lot. That's a big segment of our campus.
That's a quarter of
that we could access and give them a better student experience if
we didn't make it tougher for you guys.
Correct.
Yes.
That was the point we were trying to help the university understand.
Now I'm just going to take the report and take you to this page, and this question: to what extent do you agree with the following statements about your experience with your faith group at university? And there's some big differences between the experience of the person of faith and the person not of faith. Do you want to just highlight them for us?
Well, what it's highlighting is the experience. We were only surveying people in the faith group,
Yeah.
but we're saying compare your experience in the faith group in these key areas to your experience in the rest of the university outside of the faith group. And we had certain things we were looking at, things like, do you feel respected? Do you feel included? Do you feel connected? Do you have a sense of belonging? Now, these are values that the university want its students to say, yes, I do. And when you compare the data for their experience in the faith group, the numbers are very, very high. I feel respected, 98%. I feel included, 95%. I feel a sense of belonging, 95%. But when you ask them, but what about in the rest of your experience at university? The numbers are 50 percentage points smaller. So I feel respected, 58%. I feel included, 51%. I feel sense of belonging, 50%. So what that's saying is that the faith groups, and most of the groups surveyed were evangelical Christian groups, these gospel-based groups are actually achieving the outcomes that the university wants to achieve.
That's right.
It happens because of the gospel.
That's right.
Now,
They can't see that, but it does.
well, we're trying to help them see that. Yeah.
That's right.
How did the conversations go?
Really positive. We had a great meeting with the Deputy Vice-Chancellor and the Pro-Vice-Chancellor. All the chaplains were in attendance. We had a really interesting chat about it, and they're open to suggestions. As they repeatedly said to us, we're open to suggestions of how we might move forward. They understand that faith communities can contribute very significantly to the life of a campus.
I think there's always some discussions, without sort of talking of, quoting people exactly, there's always discussions about what's the role of a particular faith group versus an interfaith group. And when we think about the idea that a student's identity is tapped into a faith, multi-faith in that sense, or interfaith groups, really lose that. They water that down. And so one of the key findings in the report was that students who are involved in our faith groups are actually experiencing a diverse culture on campus. They're engaging with students who are in different years to them, in different courses to them, and even from different cultural backgrounds. And so the university, when they saw that, it was like, well, that is really diverse. Can we do interfaith groups? And I was like, nobody really feels like they own an interfaith group. So no one really wants to turn up. That's been my experience in 25 years on campus. So
Which is helpful for them to hear you say.
that's right. But we do want to have groups that are open to people who aren't already identifying with our faith, and the university is keen on this, to come in and experience what the faith group is about.
So what you're saying is the conversation that you had potentially changed the campus leadership's attitude to the practice of evangelism.
Evangelism is such a loaded word in the university context. I think we are open to having students come and explore and experience the grace and truth of the gospel in the community. And the university even said that they don't want students just to arrive on campus with a particular set of views and values and then acquire some vocational skills but leave with the same views and values. That they're open to students changing their views and values by engaging with a broader community.
One of the interesting things that came out in the university's own strategy to deal with this student experience problem was they recognised that universities have clubs and societies. They've got about 2 paragraphs. But they said, the issue with clubs and societies is it sounds great, a place for students to belong, but they often end up very cliquey. They often end up being actually exclusionary. One of the benefits of faith groups that have chaplains involved alongside them, particularly evangelical chaplains who understand the gospel, is that we're going to make sure that the faith groups are actually governed and driven by the gospel. They're shaped by that gospel,
That's
which
right.
means that they're going to be welcoming, they're going to be outward-looking, they're going to be communities of love and care. That's what the university actually wants. So actually, by having more gospel groups on campus, I think we can create the very community that the university,
right.
in some sense, is actually longing for.
That's right. The gospel is the answer to that.
Can you take us into your leadership teams, and as you discussed this report, what were some of the things that you thought, that's interesting, or that's going to change what we do going forward?
Well, we've always known that university can be a challenging place for people's faith. But one of the interesting stats that came out was the longer that students have been at university and involved in faith groups, the less safe they feel on campus to express their faith.
Less safe.
University
You feel safer as a first year than as a fourth year.
Yeah, the longer you're in it, in that culture, you pick up more and more of the pressure, the vibe of the place, which is leave your faith at the university gates on the way in.
That's right.
That's the pressure.
A pressure for intolerance.
It's a pressure for, we just don't want you to bring faith
Conformity.
in. It's keep faith private. Keep it outside of the university space. Now, we don't do that these days with any part of people's identity. We say, bring your politics
Bring
with
your sexuality.
you, bring your sexuality, bring your gender identity.
Yeah.
We understood that actually to force people to suppress parts of who they are is not always a very helpful thing to do. And yet, as a university, that does tend to be the vibe. And what's more, the longer students are there, the more they feel that over time. So the less safe they feel. So the stat was that in total, 44% of the students who were involved in faith groups did not feel safe to either express or practice their faith on the rest of the campus.
I went to the bathroom at Sydney University the other day and went in there, and the men's bathroom, and there was a tampon thing in there, and I thought, oh no, I've gone into the wrong bathroom. And so I raced out and then realised, no, there are urinals here, and I was in the right bathroom. But there's a very clear expression of making this place safe for the transgender person, and you're saying that's not happening for the faith person.
The university is sort of recognising this, like to their credit, they're sort of realising, but there's a fair bit of resistance as well, just in the wider university community, to that. Universities need to be secular, understanding secular as a-religious. And I think that students pick that up. They pick that up from their tutorials, from their lectures, from everywhere else. And so what we were hoping to do is actually say to the university, we think you've got a blind spot. We actually think that in your understanding of human identity, somehow you've missed the key faith component, which as people of faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, we know that that's actually at the very centre of our being. It's not just part of who I am, it's actually the heart of who I am.
That's right.
To have to leave that at the university gates on my way in, that's
It's a fundamental, absolutely the part of who I am.
And I think when you put that combined with the broader media coverage of the church, in Australia over the last couple of years, there's a perception by students who have no direct contact with a Christian or a faith group that being involved in a faith group is actually a negative experience. And so as a result of this report, the university recognises now that they can highlight positive experiences from students because the positive experiences are overwhelmingly prevalent for all the students who are involved. And so to be able to share some of those stories and encourage other students to explore, experience that faith group is something that the university needs to promote.
What do you think they might change as a result of this report?
Well, there's lots of ideas.
What are some of the things you're pushing for them to change as a result of this report?
Well, we're talking about how do we give students the option of finding out more information about the existing faith groups, because both of us experience students who are Christians or arrive on campus with a faith who don't find, despite our best efforts, don't find a faith group. And so at least...
And it has felt over the last few years, I'm not specifically speaking about Sydney Uni, but it's felt like the institution was making it more difficult for clubs and societies and faith groups as part of that.
Well, I just think Sydney University is such, as Rowan said, a large, complex, dispersed campus that to have any sort of profile for any particular group is really hard work. And so I have students who are involved with us who don't see each other in between the meetings that they have with us, and that on other campuses that are smaller, maybe more centralised, that those informal interactions are really important. But for the university, I think helping them, give them opportunities to tell positive stories about students who are involved in faith groups.
Lessons for churches coming out of this report?
One of the interesting things that came out of the report, which we didn't we hadn't particularly thought about, but it came out, was that when we surveyed the students who were involved in the faith groups, and then asked them about whether they considered themselves to be very involved in church outside, it was a very high percentage. 78% or so said, yeah, we're very involved actually in our local church community. But only 64% said, oh, we're very involved in the actual faith group on campus. So the people involved in campus groups are actually more involved in their local churches than the church. Well, I think that's useful information, because sometimes there's as a local church pastor, which I used to be, I understand the tension sometimes between, here's these wonderful young people full of energy and zeal for the Lord. I'd love them to be more involved in my local church, and yet they're going off to university and getting involved in that group. And it can feel like a tension. But actually, the testimony is most of the students are much more involved at church actually than they are on campus.
As
so
a
we're not
result
competing.
Yeah.
We actually work together, I think, in a really complementary way, because they also testified to experiencing massive or very significant growth in their Christian faith over the last 12 months as a result of being involved in the faith group on campus. So I think we can actually see that we actually do work really well as complements to the local church ministry that's going on.
Lessons for there'll be Christian leaders, staff teams of different ministries, student groups around Australia and in other parts of the world watching this. What are the lessons that they can take away? I mean, we'll put the link up to the report on the show notes of this, but what are the...
I would say that it's very easy to be intimidated by, particularly like Sydney University administration. It's an elite university, global university, and it's easy to sort of sit back and let them push us around in a sense. But this was an opportunity for us to be on the front foot, to engage with them. And when we demonstrated what was really going on with our groups in a way that was tangible, then they suddenly became very positive. And so I think my instinct is that we want to positively engage with people. We've got a good story to tell. And that for any ministry leader, look around at where the opportunities are and don't feel like you just have to be pushed to the margins.
Great. Thanks so much for coming in and talking to us.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dominic.
My guests on the Pastor's Heart, Geoff Folland from Power to Change at Sydney University, and Rowan Kemp, the Anglican chaplain and from the Evangelical Union at Sydney University. This is the Pastor's Heart, and we're back next Tuesday afternoon.